right before I get in trouble. All right. I've got 7,000 little sticky notes all over telling me to record, and they're under stuff. So so the idea of qualification would be you not saying yes to an appointment until you've had a conversation around gathering some facts, right? And there are a lot of agents who, when someone calls and says, hey, can you come over and list my house, leap out of the chair and run to the car and drive over. And I will tell you that that I've done it that way, and I've done it with qualification. And Pop-Tart real estate is what I call that, right? When someone calls, you just like pop out of the toaster like a Pop-Tart and run on over. That can be problematic. It can get you in some trouble, in that you end up being places that you shouldn't be wasting your time on. So let's run through what that qualification conversation looks like and answer any questions you might have on that, and then move forward in the scripts. Does that sound like a plan? Beauteous. So the scripts I'm talking about are located in your materials. However, they're in the materials number 4, which I didn't ask you to have ready for today. So instead, I'm going to pop that on the screen. Let me see if I can grab that for you. Hold on. Are you all seeing that, those questions? Or are you seeing my email?
We're seeing the questions.
Okay, good. So in power session number 4 on page, looks like 14, you do have this document that you can reference to run through. You can see at the top, the script is, do you have 5 minutes so I can ask you some very important questions before I come out to meet you, like before we continue along the lines, along the path of this appointment. And question number 1, I'm going to ask you to cross out or skip, only because if you remember the other day, we talked about, for me, that question didn't matter until after I had the business, right? It didn't matter to me what piece of marketing you had or where you heard about me or whatnot until I actually had a signature. And then I was quite curious to make sure that I was addressing my marketing the way it needed to be addressed. So to me, I would skip that first one. I wouldn't ask about how'd you hear about me. I'll ask that later. Number 2, 3, and 4, what do you notice about questions 2, 3, and 4? They should look at least somewhat vaguely familiar to you.
Similar to the buyer consult?
Well, it's all to deal with where they plan on moving. I mean, because you want to know where they're going.
Yeah, so that's why they're there. We do also ask those, or at least a version of those on the buyer side, Margaret. Mm-hmm. But that's not where they should be familiar to you in the last week or so. Let me refresh your memory. I'm curious. Had you sold your home? Where are you moving? What's taking you there? How soon do you need to be there? What script is that?
Oh, what is the script?
Expired.
The expired script.
It's the expired script. Absolutely. Absolutely. See, Jacqueline swoops on in and saves the day. So that's the expired script, right? And so 2, 3, and 4, remember, they're just motivation questions. Where are you going? Like where are you moving? What's taking you there? How soon do you have to be there? The expired version of that is, had you sold your home? I'm curious, where were you headed? What was taking you there? And how soon do you need to be there? So it's the same questions with just a little prefix on it to get you into the conversation from an expired perspective. So same 3 questions exist here, because if you don't know the motivation of where they're headed, and this is where Christian was going, right? If you don't know where they're headed and why they're going to be there, why they're headed there, and what's taking, let me start that over. If you don't know where they're going, why they're going, and how quickly they need to be there, you're not armed with the data or the ammunition you need later on to help you with objection handling, right? for the most part, those three questions with a couple of others are the reason I took a half a step back tonight to make sure that we addressed this before we moved further in the script work, right? Because as your questions come up in the script work about, well, what if they say this, or what if they say that, or what if they give you a hard time on this? A lot of those questions would have been answered right up here. And so when you ask these questions up front prior to you heading to an appointment and you have that information, then if it comes up later on, you get to utilize it by saying, you know, well, if I remember correctly in our initial conversation, you said that you were headed to Atlanta because of a job change and that you needed to be there by the first of the year. Is that all still accurate? Well, yes, it is. Great. So I'm curious, the choice you're making in terms of the pricing and positioning of your home, do you think that that choice gets you to Atlanta by January the 1st? Right. So if you're having an issue with pricing, a lot of times the objection handler is to go back to this conversation that you're having right up front to understand why they're a seller right now. Right. Some people are sellers because they have to be. Some people are sellers because they just want to be. Some people are sellers because they want to just give it a try. Right. You need to understand that up front to help you later on. Make sense? Cool. So let's keep going through through these questions. Number 5, I love the question number 5 puts on the table. So I'm curious, if we sell your home in the next 30 days, will that pose a problem for you? Why is that a great question? Number of different answers.
Well, because you want to see again how motivated they are, number one. Number two, once it's listed and it's priced accordingly to market conditions, our model is designed to close that listing within 30 to 45 days.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that, well, first you want to make sure that the answer to the question isn't, yes, it will pose a problem, right?
Because they may not have nowhere to go.
Exactly right, right? And so if you ask that question and they say yes, well, now you're at a stopping point to be able to say, okay, well, talk to me about that. Talk to me about what that problem would be, right? And you get to understand what might hold them back. Right. The other thing Christian said is, if we're looking to sell a property in 30 days, the idea of setting that expectation right up front is key, because that's what you're doing. You're setting expectations by asking that question. You're also uncovering whether or not there is an actual answer to that question, and if it's a negative or if it's an affirmative, then how you're going to address that, right? I one time asked that question and someone said to me, well, in 30 days, oh my goodness, well, yes. Okay, well, talk to me about that. Well, where these people were headed, their house, they were building a house like out of state, and that wasn't going to be ready for like 6 months. So they were concerned that if they sold their house quickly, they'd have no place to go. So we talked that through. What's the earliest the builder says it will be ready? Okay, let's add a month to that just in case and start working backwards. If we find you a buyer in the next 30 days, that probably means a closing in the next 60 or so, something like that. And so how much time do we have to kill? Let me ask you this, for the right buyer, which means the right number and terms, are you willing to move twice? Could we move you into a short-term rental? Or does it make sense for you to move to the new state and do a short-term something there? Or does it make sense to stay here? I'm curious, what's the deal with your job? How is that all working? Do you have any kind of allowance? Is your company moving you? And could they maybe pick up the slack of this delta between closing this house and being able to move into the next house, right? A whole nother conversation that as a consultant, you've uncovered because you asked a great question. Imagine if you didn't ask that question and now you put it on the market, and on day 21, you have multiple offers, you have 3 offers, they're all great offers, and the seller comes back to you and says, well, this happened all way too soon. We can't accept any of these offers, right? And now they're disappointed, you're frustrated, when all of that could be solved or at least handled differently if you were asking better questions up front to really understand the deal. Donna, I think you had unmuted, and then Margaret.
So another reason why I love that question is because it's such a pattern interrupt.
Mm.
They, they're not expecting you to say something like that, and nobody else that they may have been talking to is saying stuff like that. So they kind of go, huh? And start listening to you a little bit closer, because now you're different.
Yeah, I agree with that, right? Could you do that, huh, again? That was good to see.
It's like a dog, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Right. Well, and Donna's right. They kind of whip their head around, right? They certainly perk their earballs up, right? That's different than eyeballs, by the way. That's earballs. So they perk their ears up to make sure they heard you right. Now, every once in a while, someone will say to me, well, I'm concerned about saying that because what if we are unable to produce a buyer in 30 days? I want you to notice that the script doesn't say when we sell your home in the next 30 days. It says if we sell your home in the next 30 days, just like the expired script, right, that we talked about last week, that said when I was playing with somebody. And so I'm curious, let me ask you this. If we were to put your home back on the market and find a buyer in the next 30 days, would that be a benefit to you? It's the same idea, right? We're setting expectations. We're pushing out that idea of, wow, you talk a little bit differently than other people, right? And then we're going to back that up. When we push further into the scripts to get to the pricing and positioning conversation, we're going to back up selling your home in 30 days. Because guys, here's what I want you to understand, because you're going to hear me say this a number of times tonight. It doesn't take more than 30 days to sell a house. And I'm fascinated when I teach a listing clinic, one of the first questions I'll ask to a room full of real estate agents is jot down on a piece of paper how long it takes to sell a house. When you list a house, like how long does it take? And the answers are fascinating to me, because answers come back 6 months, 9 months, 4 months. Guys, here's what I can tell you. You're doing something wrong if it takes that long, right? It doesn't take more than 30 days. Even in a slower market, it doesn't take more than 30 days. And we're going to talk about the reasons why before we finish tonight. Margaret, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying something similar to what Donna was, where it's really kind of almost not exactly a promise, but just letting them know that this is a real possibility because we're really good at what we do. So it was kind of, wrapped, kind of hidden in this question, but it was really sort of a promise of service. And then the other thing I was just going to say is that it also opens a conversation that if there's a bidding war, this could be maybe one of the things that we include, because I actually won a bidding war because my buyer was able to do a 60-day close. So just could open another conversation. That's all.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And that's a really good point, right? So in multiple offer scenarios, if you're armed as the listing agent with how they might handle something that's shorter or a little longer, right? Because the next question, number 6, says, tell me what would happen if your home didn't sell? And maybe that could be adjusted in the conversation that Margaret just put on the table to say, talk to me, what would happen if your home didn't sell in the next 30 days? Right. And so you're adjusting, you're testing the waters, you're dipping your toe in the pool to kind of see where they're at by asking some questions around what their expectations are around how quickly this will happen. Love those answers. Thank you. So again, number 6, what would happen if your home did not sell? As written, it's simply there to offer do you have a plan B? Right? We're back to motivation. There's a difference in how you address and approach and consult a seller who answers the question, what would happen if your home did not sell, with, well, I don't know what we would do. I mean, I don't know how on earth, is there a chance it wouldn't sell? Oh my goodness, like we have to get someplace. We like there's urgency around what we're doing here. Versus, gee, what would happen if your home did not sell? Oh, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Understand, hear me loud and clear, listing agent person. I don't have to sell this house. I'm not desperate. I'm not in a rush, right? That's a different answer to that question. And it helps guide us forward on some of the things we may have to address throughout the rest of our consultation. Here's the other thing I want to remind you. As you're asking these questions, you're not diving deep on that per se. You may ask a follow-up question if the answer was vague, but you're certainly not objection handling it when you're qualifying the prospect. Because the qualification is just to determine whether or not you're going to take the meeting. Objection handling works best when I'm sitting face to face with some data in between me and the sellers to really have a relevant conversation about the facts. Yes, Christian.
So when I looked at that question, I understand you're asking, the reason why you're asking is because of motivation. You want to see the responses. But do you think that sometimes some sellers could take that the wrong way and say, well, you're not confident in selling my house. Why are you asking me this question?
So that's a great question. And my answer to it is, if you say it without confidence, they may hear it without confidence. If you say it confidently in the course of a system and a process of questions that you're asking to get better information to determine whether or not this is a conversation you want to continue to have, I will tell you that it's never happened to me.
Okay.
Right? It's not like, so I asked that question and someone said, oh, really? Why? Do you have a lot of homes not sell? And if they did, right? So even if someone did hear it that way, which again, I haven't had happen. However, you would just answer it. No excuse, pardon me. I didn't mean to imply that was a frequent outcome of hiring me. Ultimately, I'm asking the question to be certain about whether or not you have a plan B, right? Because if in fact the home does not sell, again, happens rarely if we follow all the systems that I can lay out for us. However, if it didn't sell, what would that mean? What would that look like for you? Number seven, how much do you want to list your home for? I'll tell you, we're getting into a couple of questions that a lot of real estate agents ignore, or they see them and cross them out and think, well, why would I ask that? Why would you ask that? How much do you want to list your home for? What's the answer?
You want to know their expectations.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, talk about setting the stage for the conversation we're about to have, right? We're going into a pricing and positioning market conditions conversation. If I know before I even go out to the house to check it out that they're looking for $600,000, and the data I look at before I go and is only confirmed when I actually arrive at the house to do my walkthrough, that we're talking about a $450,000 house, well, now I know how I have to position the conversation. I know that there may be some disappointment. I know there may be some pushback. There may be some disbelief. I know I have to be armed with facts and data to really help them understand the proper positioning of their home. Conversely, and I'm going to tell you that this actually happens way more than many of you think it does, is that when you ask the question, how much are you looking to list your home for? And they say 600, and the work you do says it likely should go on for 675. Well, now you have a very different conversation to have, and you have a very, frankly, it keeps you calmer, right? Because those of you who tend to get to kind of err on the side of getting sucked into subjective, the worry part of that, oh my goodness, I'm gonna outline something that they're not going to be happy with. Well, you can now not worry about that because you know you're on the other side of that. And that happens way more than you think it does, right? Where they've underestimated the value. I'll tell you what, especially right now, I think I told you I'm refinancing my house, and I was afraid that my house wouldn't appraise at the number that I gave to the mortgage folks to work the numbers off of, and it ended up appraising $50,000 higher. I do this for a living, and I underestimated the value of my house, right? So it happens a lot. So how much do you want to list your home for? Number 8, how much do you owe on the property? I would add the word currently. How much do you currently owe on the property? Why do you ask that question?
Well, you want to see what their, well, you want to see if they're current on their mortgage payments, which is kind of huge because you don't want to see that they're behind in a pre-foreclosure because that's a different conversation.
Yeah, stop there half a second, Christian. Stop there a second, because you hit on 8A, right? And so since you said it, I want to have everyone kind of write that in their notes.
Mhm.
That question is not here, but the question Christian just asked, I want you to add. So it's how much do you currently owe on the property? And then the follow-up question to that is, and are you currently current on your mortgage? Right? Are you current on your mortgage payments? So I'm sorry, Christian, keep going. Tell us why it's important.
Because I mean, you want to see, you want to calculate their net proceeds. I mean, you could, again, I do this in a two-step process, obviously after you evaluate the property, but on the end of my CMA, you can give them, what they're going to net after the sale closes with taxes and their current loan payoff. Because ultimately that could be their motivation too. How much are they going to net after what they owe on the current property?
Yeah, right. So without knowing how much they owe, it's impossible to help them calculate their net. And I love what Christian just said is utilizing the net when it's positive as a lure, as some bait, as a reason to be excited about the sale, right?
Yeah.
It may help people in certain scenarios who aren't necessarily as urgent a seller as some other sellers might be, want to get to the closing table faster. Oh man, look at that. When all is said and done, I get to put an extra 78,000 or 115,000 or 312,000, whatever it is, in my pocket. I wasn't expecting that much, right? And don't underestimate the fact that that happens more than you think. Great point, Christian. Thank you for that. What else do you want to make certain when you ask how much do you owe on the property and the follow-up, are you current on your mortgage payments? What else are you attempting to diagnose or not? Really important.
Overall credit worthiness.
So credit worthiness is not going to necessarily come from those two questions. However, you're on the right track, Lisa.
If it were a buyer's market, how low they could go if you had to reduce the price?
So maybe helping with some parameters, right? Getting your mind around what those parameters might look like to help them create a sale. But we're still missing the big one. I'll give you a hint. Its initials are SS.
Short sale.
There we go. Right? You want to make sure that you're not headed into a scenario where the property may need to be sold short. If somebody's underwater and they don't tell you, the house may well be worth $600,000, except if they owe $750,000, we have a problem, right? So it's not just about the value of the property, it's about how much do you owe and are you current on your payments. If in fact you've done some pre-research and the property is worth about $600,000, and when they say they owe $675,000 and they've missed a couple of mortgage payments, what's your path forward?
Well, you need to ask them why. I guess they're in. I mean, if you don't mind me asking, why are you behind in your payments? I know it's going to be a sensitive subject.
Yeah, and so I'm not sure I would ask why are you behind in your payments, because and I think the answer, Christian, is I may not ask that yet. Remember, we're still on the phone qualifying,
I hear you.
right? And so I may hold that for more of a face-to-face. I love that your instincts go to let's plumb this a little deeper, right? I might just hold that particular question till I was more face-to-face. And so when we uncover the fact that they might be underwater, we get to kind of put the brakes on to say, so it sounds to me as if you may be in a scenario where you may owe more than the property is currently worth. Is that something you were thinking about? Have you done any research on what that might look like? Right, so we're going to ask a couple of questions without like hitting short sale right between the eyeballs you're going to ask a couple of questions. Here's a big reason why you want to ask that. Most of you are not qualified to take next steps if it sounds short, because listing short sale properties is a specialty in our industry. And if you haven't had specific training on that, you could really screw up somebody's finances by just blindly moving forward as if they hadn't said anything about a short sale, or deciding that you'll just figure it out as you go. So kind of, the rules in our brokerages are, you have a right to run whatever business you want to run. However, when it starts to put the clients in danger, we are going to ask that if you uncover short sale and you haven't had specific short sale training and don't have short sale experience, that you bring along somebody who does. That's an opportunity, just as if someone were looking to, if you had a buyer who all of a sudden wanted to buy in New London, right? Most of you have no idea what's going on in New London. And even though you're licensed to do it, that is likely a referral opportunity for you. Plus, who wants to drive 2 hours each way showing property? That's not a good use of your time, right? So uncovering short sale opportunities or potential is important. Any questions on that? So let me ask this question. How much do you want to list your home for? How much do you owe on the property? I'm curious, are you currently current on your mortgage payments? Do those sound like questions that you can ask? And I'm asking you from the perspective of, is there anybody who's looking at those questions thinking, those sound a little bit close to a line that I feel might be asking personal questions? Anybody looking at them that way?
That was my initial thought.
Yeah, because it's what happens, right? We start to look at that and think, oh goodness, how am I going to get those past my lips, right?
I guess just thinking about it from like the other side of it, like if I were in that seat and someone I don't really know well, if that's the case, just answering those questions could be, it's a little personal.
Right. So here's where I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to look at those questions as the questions that confident real estate professionals who do this all the time ask people, right? Because here's the thing. If you've ever sold a house before and somebody came and sat across from you or was on the phone with you and didn't ask those questions, remember I said we're always modeling behavior. I would be concerned that they didn't ask me those questions, right? Some sellers aren't first-time sellers. They've done this before. They know the drill and they know how some of this works. And so I think by modeling behavior, not asking those questions, you're actually, instead of showing confidence and skill, you're actually revealing the fact that in tough moments, I back away. When things get a little too personal or a little too tough, I'd rather not ask the question. I'd rather sit back on that one. And if you think about modeling, I'm not sure that I would jump to hire someone where when something got a little uncomfortable, they chose to withhold or back away from that. So again, modeling that behavior of confidently just asking those questions, right? And I tell you, it's one of those things that if you're not good at it, you just have to practice it. You have to practice it. You have to practice it, right? When I do one-on-one coaching, there are things that I ask nowadays that I wouldn't have asked 10 years ago from a coach's perspective. And here's the thing: if I don't ask really pertinent, relevant questions that can be personal, and I'll oftentimes put something in front of it. If it's okay with you, I'd like to ask X, Y, and Z. What I have found is that when you ask those powerful questions, people respond to those powerful questions and they dive in and have more respect for the fact that you are there to help them and that you didn't step back and hide from them. Go ahead, Seth. Sorry, I stumped on your question.
No, it's fine. I cut you off by accident. Wouldn't it be beneficial before you even get started in question one or maybe before question 2, just to ask if it's their first time selling, because then you can tailor these kind of sensitive questions in a different way.
Sure. I like that idea. You could certainly at the top add in a question. I think the question I would ask is, I used to ask it on the buy side. I actually never thought to ask it on the list side. Where were you 20 years ago? Don't tell me, because I have a feeling that the answer is you were in 3rd grade. So the
A little bit older than that, but
okay. So the question I used to ask on the buyer side was, I'm curious, is this your first purchase in the state of Connecticut? So you could use that same question on the seller side, because now you're not asking, hey, have you ever done this before, right? You're asking, have you ever done it before here, right? Because even if they have done it before, if they've sold houses in California, well, the process is very different, right? And so I like to tailor that conversation to, have you ever sold a house here in Connecticut? So now they're answering the question both for reasons that I like to have them answer it, and the idea that Seth had behind it, so that you'd know a little bit more going into these additional questions. Yeah, I love that addition. I love it. There's also a question that I would ask you to add, a question that I used to ask everybody that's not here. I'm not sure why it's not here. And that is, I'm curious, will you be seeing any other agents? I'm curious, will you be seeing any other agents? And if they say yes, the follow-up question is, excellent. Do you mind if I ask who you're seeing? And if the answer is no, the follow-up question is, got it. And are you considering selling the property on your own? Why would I ask those questions?
You want to see if they're shopping around, and looking for a particular agent. Because remember last week you asked, some people might be looking for personality. Some people may be looking for someone who was going to give them a better price. There's different factors that could play into who they choose and select.
Absolutely, right? I want to know if I'm alone or if there's competition. And if there is competition, if at all possible, what do I want to know by that follow-up question I gave you?
Who is the other person they're competing against?
Who it is, right? Now, sometimes sellers choose not to tell you that. Sometimes sellers will say, yes, we're seeing other people and I'd rather not share with you who it is. Sometimes they tell you everything. Oh yeah, absolutely. We've got two other people coming in. They're scheduled for just after you, one before you, one after you. This is the person, this is who it is, this is the company, this is why we think they're interesting, this is why we called them, right? And so sometimes you ask a question and you get more information than you ever knew what to do with, right? Which is why I ask them. Just because you ask a question, and this is important, you should jot this down someplace. Just because you ask a question doesn't mean you get an answer. However, that doesn't invalidate the question. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't have asked the question, right? There are a number of, when we get into our anatomy of the seller transaction on Friday, there's a number of spots where we're going to kind of look at the whole process of once you receive an offer as a listing agent, where you're asking questions of the buyer's agent that, frankly, the buyer's agent shouldn't be answering some of them. That doesn't mean I'm not going to ask, because some buyer's agents will tell you everything. Now, remember, I work for the seller, and so I'm going to dive a little deep on some of these things that I'm going to ask. And again, we'll get to that on Friday. But just because the answer might be, Rick, I can't tell you that, doesn't mean I'm not going to ask the question. Just because I ask a seller who else they're going to see, if they choose not to share that with me, it doesn't invalidate the question. And it continues to push forth a level of skill and confidence in the fact that I do this for a living and do it every day, and that I play to win, and that I'm going to help them play to win in the marketplace. Do you see how that sets a tone?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So let's say I asked that question to somebody. I'm 2 years into the real estate, and they tell me, yeah, you know what? I have 2 other agents coming in. I have Jody Boxer and I have Auslander Group coming in next right after you. What should be my response?
Well, the response is always the same. Great, thank you so much for sharing that. Right? You're just taking notes. You're writing things down. Right? So you're not objection handling on the telephone, right? And now you're one of 3. That happens. That doesn't happen often, right? That they see more than one person from the same company, but it does happen every once in a while, right? And so the idea of understanding who you're up against and who you might be able to do some research on, right? One of the things I used to do is I used to ask that question, get the info, and then I used to run a 12 or 24 month run from the MLS list of all the properties that they sold versus me. And if my numbers were better, I would bring that to the table.
I was just gonna go on to that because there was an agent, I don't want to say names, used to work for us here, that I believe used to use that leverage as saying, oh, you're interviewing this person? Well, these are my stats right here. This is how much I sold in the past couple of years here. And this is the agent that you're considering.
Yep.
So that's
Yes.
that's okay to use that. It's not bashing agency relationship or anything like that.
So great question. Let's address it head on, right? You have to make a choice about what information you'll use and how you'll use it. Because I told you I would only tell you the truth, let me take that off for a second. I will tell you that when I was newer in the business, I used to do a bunch of things that I don't necessarily advocate you doing today. And some of it was exactly what Christian just described. I would run numbers, and I would use those numbers as a tool, perhaps a different way than I would today, right? And so what that means is not that it was dirty pool so much. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. So here's the deal. You can't make up the numbers. If you're running reports from the MLS and you're sourcing the MLS and their real stats, numbers are just numbers, right? Some people, it's like money. Some people have more of it. Some people have less of it. The numbers are just the numbers, right? And if you're brand new to the industry, guess what? You can't hide from your numbers, or at least you can't hide from your numbers forever, right? There will be an opportunity at some point where you're going to have a first something, or it's going to be your third something versus somebody who's done it for 300 times. This is exactly where confidence comes into play, right? If you're concerned that you aren't good enough, or you aren't as experienced enough, or you can't get the job done versus somebody who's been doing it longer than you, that comes across in how you have a conversation, right? Instead, you have to understand and convince yourself first and foremost that regardless of your lack of actual experience, you have confidence, you have passion, you have excitement, you have charisma, you've learned skills. You're going to come at this from the perspective of making sure that you do the best job possible for this person. You're going to ask better questions. You're going to be a better consultant. You're going to understand the market better than anybody else. All of those things that I just mentioned have nothing to do with experience. They have to do with preparation and mindset, right? So you can be all of those things and have never sold a house. And I'll tell you what I experienced. Because I made a decision the day I got my license that I was going to be better at this than any of my competition, I never had those questions asked of me. And I'm not making that up when I say never. Nobody ever said, how many homes have you sold? Right? I was 28 years old when I started in real estate, and I looked like I was 14 when I was 28. So somebody can unmute and say, what do you mean, Rick? You still look like you're 14. I wouldn't mind that. So the idea of looking like a kid and showing up at somebody's front door, I would have questions about my age come up. But interestingly enough, those never translated into questions about my experience. Because what I did really well from the start was project a level of excitement, passion, and confidence that I was here to get the job done and to get it done better than anybody else can get it done. And the second you can create kind of that cocoon of comfort around a potential seller, the rest is relatively simple. Yes, Seth.
So I'm only asking this because I know myself. And I'm very much a show me the numbers, let me see what you've done. So for someone who's brand new in the game, do you have any advice on if I encounter someone, because a lot of my network is in the same, or thinks the same way as I do. So while they'll take the meeting with me because we're close, it may ultimately come down to performance. So are there any reports or stats that you'd recommend running? I know you can do it on the overall brokerage, but I'm just curious how to pivot when that type of personality is across the table for you.
Well, so is it that kind of personality? It seems like your question is, it's that kind of personality. Show me the numbers doesn't necessarily mean show me your sales, right? So right. I look at the pivot point as I'm going to show you all the numbers that matter, right? My numbers don't matter. The market's numbers matter, and my ability to help you interpret those numbers to get you across the finish line the way you want to get across the finish line, those are the numbers we're going to focus on. However, I know where you're going, right? So that's my first answer. My second answer is, if you're talking about people in your database, right? Because people who know you, like you, and trust you and are already predisposed to do business with you, for the most part, they know you're brand new, right? They knew like 3 months ago that you did something else and that now you're in real estate. So it's not a hard leap for them to think, oh, gee, I wonder if she's brand new at this. So inside of your database, it's hard to hide from that. So what I would say is don't. As a matter of fact, I might hit it head on to simply say, so if Seth is my friend, right, and he took the meeting because, he feels sorry for me and wants to make sure that I at least feel like I'm being considered. And I know Seth well enough to know that one of the things that he's kind of looking for is somebody with some experience. I think I'll just hit that head on. And the conversation might be, so, Seth, I appreciate us you taking the time to have this conversation. Look, I'm not here tonight to pull the wool over your eyes. You know that by hiring me, this will be my very first listing. And here's how that's a positive for you. First of all, I have aligned myself with the #1 brokerage in Fairfield County, right? And so you do pivot to the brokerage's numbers. Right. Second, I have spent more time than almost any competitor that I know learning and understanding this market so that I can help you learn and understand this market so you can make great business decisions. Third, because you're my very first one, you get my undivided attention. There are no other sellers who are calling me except you. There are no other opportunities for me to have to go and sit open house someplace else other than you. You get my undivided attention. And one of the things that I have learned over time is that sometimes when you hire some of these big teams with tons of closings under their belt and whatnot, you get lost in the shuffle. What I can promise you tonight is that you will never, ever feel lost in the shuffle. As a matter of fact, over communication is one of the things that one of the standards I've built my business on. So I just wanted to address that right up front in case you were a little bit nervous about that. And I also want to be clear that I'm here tonight to help you. And I'm not a child. I'm a big boy. You can ask me whatever it is you feel you need to ask me so that you create comfort for yourself and for your family in having me get this job done for you. Or something like that, right?
Yeah. And then would you take a different approach, same scenario, but following up on a lead that you called and expired and you had an appointment. Someone that doesn't know you, like, so you don't get that benefit of goodwill.
So if somebody who doesn't know me, now this is just me, you guys may decide differently for yourselves and for your own business. When I was new in the business, I absolutely never said that out loud. I just behaved as if I wasn't, and behaved as if I had all the experience in the world. And again, that level of confidence created a version of business rapport for me that didn't have people saying, how many homes have you sold? So,
Okay.
so for me, if they're strangers, I'm not volunteering that information personally. I never liked the whole new word. I'm new at this, right? Because to me, it wasn't relevant, right? Every surgeon has their first surgery. And unless the patient died, who cares? Surgery number 1 and surgery number 101, unless number 1 died, that's the only time that matters, whether it was number 1 or something else down the line, right?
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
Right.
Yes.
I guess in kind of like in response to Christian, how you were saying that, of the people who are kind of like, was it bashing or I guess like I would be willing to share my initial instinct, and I don't know, but I feel like there'd be a lot of people that would have that. Is when you were saying that example, my very first initial instinct is it brings me back to kind of like that person that is with you, and while they're your friend that's with you, they're talking poorly and talking bad about like another friend of yours. And as soon as they leave, don't you kind of find yourself sitting back and going, well, what did they say when I'm not in the room?
Yeah, so great point. And so let's address that, right? Here's the thing. Comparing numbers and talking badly about another real estate agent are two different things, if you choose to have them to be two different things. Where I started to go was that in my early days, I had them be the same thing, right? And I used those numbers, I wielded them like the weapon I knew they were, and I did it in such a way that all right, I'll air some of my dirty laundry. So some of the things that I used to say to people when I would ask who they were, I shouldn't tell you these things. Some of these are not flattering to me. And again, I'm not advocating for it, because I was young and stupid and grew as a business person to move away from these tactics, because I found that ultimately what Chelsea said is exactly what came back, right? It's the idea of when you speak badly about someone when they're not in the room, the second you leave, that the thought on that person's mind is, what is he going to say about me when I'm not in the room? That is exactly right, Chelsea. And so the idea would be to utilize numbers. Once I got into business with Debbie, and we were kind of talking through strategies and tactics, she looked at some of the things I used to do with numbers and said, well, what if we moved that a little bit? What if we softened that a little bit, right? And the way we softened me a little bit was we still ran numbers when we could, and we would put up on a screen, or we would put down in front of people the just a little graph. It was our numbers versus our competitors' numbers. And the conversation we used to have was, so look, I know you said you were meeting, Maria Smith and John Thomas as well, both of whom we absolutely love. There's always a compliment, right? So the way we made the pivot to using these things and not having it be bashing is it was always about compliments. It was always about they are lovely people. Couldn't love them more. Right. As a matter of fact, just finishing up some deals where they sold, another one of my listings or whatever. We put this in front of you from the perspective of, we want you to have all the data points that may be relevant to you prior to making this decision. If these data points are not relevant to you, well, then that's okay too. But just like the comparable data information and the market conditions data information, it was important to us for you to understand basically that our experience, right? Because when our numbers were higher, we would lay those things out. Our experience speaks to us being able to troubleshoot issues that come up in your transaction before you even know they're issues, right? And so we lay this on the table for you mainly for the reason of showcasing our level of experience in getting the job done and keeping it nice and smooth for you. So we made it about a value proposition and a benefit instead of look how great we are versus look how sucky they are.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see that change? So for what it's worth, that's so. And I don't think that's if you have the numbers, I don't know why you wouldn't use them, right? If you don't have the numbers, pivot to brokerage numbers. You just change it to my team and I, or stay away from the numbers altogether. Just know, as Christian said, that when you are in competition, that your numbers are being used against you. So make sure that you have how to have a conversation around either a defense of that or proudly no defense of that, right? And what I mean by that is there may be a way for you to have a conversation around my team and I's numbers, right? That kind of combats what somebody else said, or you just let what somebody else said lie flat and present your value proposition. Yes? You can't control everybody else, but you can control you. Okie dokie. Let's cruise forward if we can. So when we left on Monday, we were on step number 2 in mastering the listing consultation. I want to dive through the rest of this so we get through pricing tonight, and we have an hour and 3 minutes to do that. So that should be enough to get us through a pricing conversation. Let's dive back into the scripts. Step 2, setting the stage. Can I say one other thing before we move forward? And this is going to be, it may sound like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. Remember that, number one, this is a business, right? This is a business. And so even if someone behaves badly, I have never found it productive to spend a whole lot of time on, well, I don't know why he used those numbers against me. That's so mean and terrible and horrible. Well, you know what? Again, you can't control other people. If he did that, he did that. Like move past it. Know that there needs to be a different conversation for you the next time, so that if you lost that round, well, that's just one round. You'll have another shot, and now you have to win the next. Can win the next round. So remember that this is a business. It's not always about holding each other's hands and singing Kumbaya, right? That's not always how this goes. Now, at the same time, I want you to remember that you always have to look you in the face in the mirror. You always have to be able to go to sleep on your pillow comfortably each night, the way you behave, what you bring to the table, what you can and will say about others versus yourself, right? So there's a balancing act. Business in America sometimes is nasty. That's just the way it goes. You always get to make a choice about how you run your business. What are the standards and policies you have in your business about how you will behave, about things that you will say versus what you won't say? Where are the lines that you won't cross? Because remember, we're building businesses based on coming from contribution, and you still have to wake up with yourself each day. So I know that maybe sounds contradictory, and yet both things are true, right? Both things are true. And business in America isn't always nasty. As a matter of fact, most of the time, it's actually quite pleasant, right? And so sometimes somebody might do something that turns you the wrong way. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time worrying about it. Move on. Move on. Yes? Am I making sense? Okay. I don't want you to think that I'm preaching a Pollyanna attitude, because I'm not. And at the same time, I want you to recognize that building a business, part of building a business is to understand what the soul of that business looks like and how you contribute to it. And it's all about standards. What standards are you setting and how are you moving forward on those standards? Right? Remember this too. Building a business, when you build a business about standards, as your business grows, it's easier for you to remove yourself from the day-to-day of that business. If you're looking for real estate as a means of growing a business that you can eventually step out of and have it run without you, if you build a business that's focused entirely around you, do you see how hard it is to then step out of that? Because now the business just collapses in because it was all about you. If you build a business based on principles and standards, and you can find people to be in business with that can emulate and will emulate those same standards, well, eventually you can step out and have people deliver those same standards to your clients. Because what I have found as someone who has stepped personally out of his sales business, and that sales business still goes on without me, including people who I sold houses to, who now want to list their house, who they don't get me, because it was never about me. It was about a level of service and a standard of care for those clients that my team actually delivers at a higher level than I ever did. And it allows me to go and do other things and still earn an income with listings and sales. Yes, no, maybe so?
Mhm.
Okay, good. All right, let's dive into the nitty gritty. My goodness, it's like we went to church for a while. Holy Christmas. Whew. I'm sweating. Okay, so diving back into the setting the stage, we had gotten through just the first third, right? We kind of got through the first third of the intro section of this script. I want to focus on the other 2/3 of this script, and then we'll move forward. And we will answer a question. I can't remember. It may have been Kristen who put the question on the table before we left about closing at the bottom there. No, maybe it wasn't Kristen. I can't remember. Somebody asked about. It seems to me that you're closing.
Margaret.
It was Margaret. There we go. So quickly, and so we're going to address that question as well, Margaret. All right. So the middle third there, where it says, right, we only have 3 goals for today. I want you to kind of write on the side of your document there, those 3 goals. That's really the agenda section, right? You're just kind of laying out the agenda for the meeting, right? Number 1, we're going to review your motivation to sell this house now and agree on a price that will cause it to sell. 2, we'll take a moment to answer any questions you may have. And 3, we'll decide tonight whether you want to hire me, right? That's the agenda. Those are the things that we're going to spend time doing. Review motivation, decide on a price that will cause it to sell, take a moment and answer questions, and decide about hiring. Talk to me about that agenda. Why is that an important concept to push out right at the very beginning?
Well, you're setting the expectations of the meeting, and that's why you're there.
Absolutely, right? Here's the thing. Nobody wants to arrive at a meeting without any kind of clear expectations. Because then there's no way to know whether or not, okay, we're going to be here for 10 minutes, for 3 hours, for like how. So now we know what we're going to accomplish. By the way, I think Seth asked last on Monday about the time frame. If you go back and look at the here, I'll pop it back on the screen real quick. If you go back and look at the bottom of this qualification form, it says, just so you know, our meeting will take between blank and blank minutes, okay? Right, so in the qualification, I think it was Seth who said, would you ever proactively let them know how long it might take, right? I gave you a script for answering the question, how long might this take? My answer is always 30 to 40 minutes longer if you have questions. And so just wanted to show you that there is this opportunity here at the bottom of this document where if you choose to proactively share that, you can do that. So do you agree that setting these expectations, there's really 4 expectations. We're reviewing motivation, right? Why are you a seller? Regardless of the market, why are you a seller, right? Tell me what's driving this decision. We're going to agree on a price. Is that something that is your goal in this meeting? Is to agree on a price? Say yes, the answer is yes, right? Yeah, so you've arrived. Well, that was fun. I said say yes, and literally everybody who's on screen went like this. Here, I'm gonna try something else. Write me a check for $10,000. Oh, very good. See, some of you are quick. All right, I like that. So the idea of you setting these expectations for the client, I want you to also recognize that if you will commit to using this script and these words, you're also setting the expectation for yourself, right? And mostly that is for that number 3, right? We're going to decide today whether you want to hire me. I want you to recognize that sometimes we chicken out with the hiring portion. Now, when you set the expectation that these are the things we're going to do, if you then don't ask for the business, if you don't close, right, now you're not in integrity. So part of the reason this is there is to set the expectation for the seller that what we're going to do tonight are these things, including deciding on whether or not you're going to hire me, and set the expectation for yourself. Now, if you remember, one of the things that was asked on Wednesday was, well, what if you get all the way through this and they say we want to think about it, right? Part of where I couldn't go with that, because we hadn't had this conversation yet, is when I set the expectation to decide tonight whether you're going to hire me, maybe at that point in time, somebody would have said, well, you know, we're big thinkers, so we'll listen to what you have to say tonight, but I don't know that we're deciding tonight. Right? And so you get to continue to have that conversation. You know, I completely understand. What I find is that most of the time, most of my clients, by the time we get to the end of this conversation, feel quite differently about that. Let's do this. Let's let the process work and address that when we get to the end, if that's all right. Right? I'm setting a new expectation that, you know, yeah, I hear that a lot. I understand the concern, and yet, most of the time, by the time we're done here, you will be so in love with me that not only will you sign my piece of paper, but you may decide to present a ring for marriage. Right? So.
You get a life insurance policy first?
Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Depends on the value of the house. So take a quick look at number. Do you have an idea of the agenda we're setting and why? Okay, let's move on to the last piece and answer Margaret's question. So that last piece is starting to do exactly what we told them we would do, right? Because those first 2 questions do what? They measure what?
Motivation.
They measure motivation. So we just said that the first thing we're going to do is review your motivation, right? So literally 30 seconds later, we're reviewing the motivation. So we've laid out a plan, and then we immediately start to implement that plan. Remember, you're always modeling behavior. And so when you model behavior that says, here's what I'm about to do, and then you start to do it, what does that create for the seller client in you?
Reassurance.
Reassurance, confidence, exactly right. right? Exactly right. Because we're always modeling behavior. If you don't lay out a plan and then you start down whatever plan you're doing, well, you haven't accomplished that same thing. You haven't shown them that this is what I said we were going to do and now we're doing it. So you lose the points of integrity and confidence. I've said a couple of times that you might not get points, right? Or you might lose points. I will tell you that, let me explain why I say that. I have always believed since the day I started my business that winning a listing is as easy as walking in and just being the one, right? And how you are the one is you earn more points than everybody else. And you earn points from the minute you start speaking to that potential client to the day after they sign the paperwork. You earn points for asking great questions to qualify them. Because it makes them feel confident that you know what you're doing and know what you're talking about. You earn points by confirming appointments the night before. You earn points by being on time or a few minutes early for your appointments, right? You earn points for over communicating. You earn points for sending the pre-listing package. You earn points for every little piece that you do. And setting the agenda and then diving right into the agenda, you earn points for that. Don't give away the easy points, right? It's so easy to think, well, those are all small things. You're right. Some of them are small things, but oh man, when I tell you that a lot of those small things add up to push you over the top, it's not about the price that you guys determine at the end. That's not why most people hire real estate agents. It's why everyone, including sellers themselves, think real estate agents get hired, but I am here to tell you that the best real estate agents get hired before they even talk about price or position. They get hired because they've modeled proper behavior to earn the title of the one. Then by the time you're having a pricing and positioning conversation, we're just working together, right? Now we're partners. Now we're just making that decision together. Make sense? Some of you are looking at me like you don't quite trust what I'm saying, and I understand that because some of what I'm saying is experiential. You have to experience it to go backwards and say, oh man, that dude like 3 months ago in that class, he was actually right. Again, I've done it both ways. There are some of you on this call who have done it both ways, right? One just simply works better than the other. And the path I'm pushing you down is the way that works better. Donna, would you agree with that?
Thank you for calling on me. I'm like exploding here. Yes, 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 yes. And I did this for, I don't know, 12 years, a different way. And then experiencing this with Rick Ignite. It's one of the reasons why I come back. This concept of showing up and being the one, it's going to sound over the top, but it is life-changing. It's completely life-changing to get that concept and to show up in that way. And like he said, it is miraculous. All of a sudden, you are just working together. So even if it sounds crazy, I implore you, try it once. Just try it once.
Because you'll never go back.
You'll never go back.
Can I add to this too, actually?
Of course.
So I agree with you with the importance of asking these motivation questions too, because what some other realtors out there are not doing, and I can attest this when I call some listing appointments as well, is that some other agents are just strictly just looking out for themselves. They're just pushy and they're saying, hey, even though the market right now is the best time to sell, you should do it, you should do it, you should do it. But what they're not doing is they're not building a rapport with these people, and they're not asking them the right questions, and they're not caring, where they need to go. So, I certainly agree with you that these questions are important, because not only for motivation, but it just shows that you actually care about these people.
Yeah. That is so true. That is so true, Christian, right? Because without the version of care, without it coming from a place of contribution, I think it's the reason why I wear the word aggressive like a badge, right? I do not run from that word at all because I am aggressive on behalf of others. I'm not aggressive on behalf of myself or my own income. I'm aggressive on behalf of you achieving your goals, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, right? I'm aggressive in this setting. I'm aggressive on behalf of each of you earning the income you want to earn as business owners in this brokerage, right? And so I'm gonna call me aggressive. I'll wear that all day long and twice on Tuesday proudly because it's aggressive on behalf of someone's goals and needs versus aggressive on behalf of me making money, right? We have a term for that. It's called commission breath, right? You never want to breathe commission breath on any client, right? Or any potential client, because it's a big turnoff, right? It's a big turnoff. It's worse than like garlic breath, right? Commission breath, like, ugh, gross. All right, shall we keep going? So let's get to Margaret's question. So the three critical questions at the bottom of Set the Stage are, do you really want to sell your house? Right, so again, we're measuring motivation again. They've already asked this over and over and over again. There's a reason that we keep asking them to confirm it, right? Do you really want to sell your house? This is the first time we've asked it that directly. I want to know that the answer is yes, because and if ever challenged on that question, my answer was always, I appreciate why you're asking about that question. Ultimately, I ask it from the perspective of you and I are about to enter a partnership. And it's a partnership that I take very seriously. And I go all in on my partnerships. And I just simply want to make sure that you're going all in with me, right? Because that's how we get the result you're looking for as quickly and effectively and efficiently as possible. Number two, are you willing to price your house to sell, or do you want it to sit on the market? What do you notice about that? There are only how many choices?
One.
Right? So the script has two choices. One is price it to sell, and the other is have it sit on the market. What we're looking to do is have them narrow things down to only choosing that one choice, which is where Lisa was going. And that is, yes, I am willing to price it correctly. Because who is going to say, oh, you know what, I think my desire is to have it sit on the market month after month after month after month after month. No one answers that, right? So the relevant path is price your house to sell. And again, regardless of what gets said there, I think when I was playing with whomever I was playing with on Monday, they said, well, I certainly don't want to give my house away, and yet I understand where you're going. That's a great answer. I don't need to confirm that. I don't need to dig any deeper. Right? That to me says that answer is, well, I am willing to price it to sell as long as I can understand that what pricing it to sell actually means. I don't hear pushback in that answer. I don't hear, well, I want more than it's worth. I just hear, you haven't given me the tools yet to be able to make that decision. And that's fair because I haven't. Right at this point in time, I haven't given her those tools. And then question number three, do you want me to handle the sale for you? So Margaret pointed out that we know these people for about 3.5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at this point. And that's true because we've spent a lot of time on this script, but it's 4 to 5 minutes of time, actual elapsed time. It's very, very simple and quick. And the question mark of, wow, that kind of looks like a close. So let's talk about it. The first thing I want to lay on the table for you is experience tells me that if you will use that close at this point that early, 3 out of 10 times, the answer to that question will be, Well, yes, of course. That's why we're here. Which then allows you to kind of take a pivoted shortcut to, great. So, you know, I mean, I appreciate that. I'm really excited to get to work for you. Let's dive into the contract portion of our program this evening so that we can get through the paperwork and then together run through the numbers as the market may point you to making a great choice in pricing and positioning. 3 out of 10 times. So this is the question I have for you. If 30% of the time you could shortcut the listing consultation to a signature on a listing agreement and then a partnership conversation around the price, is it worth closing that early for those kinds of results? So in case you were curious, the answer is yes. Yes, it is absolutely worth it, right? 3 out of 10 times. You know how much time that could save you? You know how much time that could save your clients? Let me tell you a quick story. Debbie and I were doing a consultation for somebody one time, right on the first floor of the building I'm sitting in today, which is where our seller consultation room is. And in the old days, we used to have, instead of a conference room table, we set it up more like somebody's living room. So we had these two big overstuffed chairs for the clients to sit in, and the small little coffee table, and then 2 chairs for us to sit in with the large screen TV behind our heads. And we did it that way because somebody said if you make them feel like they're in their living room, they'll be feel more at home and be more amenable to wanting to move forward or something. So we tried it. Anyway, we're about halfway through our little dog and pony show, and the guy he's sitting in one of these big, comfortable, cushy chairs. He was all alone, and when I tell you, he was rooching around and half standing, half sitting, and fixing his jacket, and like it got so distracting after a while that Debbie was in the middle of talking, and I kind of put my hand over here to stop the conversation, and I looked across the table and I said, Mr. Jones, I cannot help but notice that you look terribly uncomfortable. Is there anything we can do to help you out? And he said, oh, thank you so much for asking that question. Guys, I don't need to hear all this stuff. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want you to just list my property. I'm going to tell you what, that was a big aha for me. Really big aha, right? Here we are dancing and doing our whole little show. And this guy was like wanting to shove hot needles in his eyes. Because he was like, oh, I don't need you don't need to sell me on this. Right? So it was that moment that changed us moving forward. We started to ask a question right up front. This is before we started to do the version of this that we're doing with you. But our very first question was, I'm curious, were you able to review the pre-listing package? And did you have any questions about marketing? Because that's what we were going through. We're going through our whole marketing spiel. Because real estate agents think that's what is important to sellers. I'm here to tell you that is not what's important to sellers, which is why we put all of it into a pre-listing package and send it ahead of time so they can review it and come back and ask any questions about it. We touch on it. Any questions on that? Anything we should address? Great. If it's all right with you, we'd like to move into the numbers portion and just dive right into the numbers, because frankly, that's what people care about. That's what they want. And that moment in time changed us forever, because it was like, oh man. So again, that's one of those opportunities that had we been moving through this script and said, do you want us to handle the sale for you? He would have said yes in a heartbeat. And we wouldn't have had to have him be so horribly uncomfortable for 15 or so minutes. Maybe it was longer, right? So here's the other side of that. I've said this before, I want to just reiterate it. Make sure that you recognize what's going on humanly in the same room as you. If someone's like got a cricket in their shirt, you need to address that, right? Ignoring it would just be weird. So don't be inhuman. Recognize what's going on around you and just kind of call it out. We just stopped and said, my goodness, you look so uncomfortable. You know, what can we do to help? Come at it from a place of compassion. Come at it from a place of assistance. Yes, Christy.
I thought you were going to tell us that he didn't like the big comfy chairs that you put him in.
Well, the reason I tell you that he was sitting in big comfy chairs is because he looked so completely uncomfortable. And most people would sit in those chairs and be like, oh, that's the other reason we got rid of them, is because we found like people were starting to doze off in the big comfy chairs. I'm like, no, eyes front, come on, we got things to do here. So the reason I bring that up is because he was uncomfortable even in a big cushy chair. So anywho, questions, comments, concerns on that? Morgan, does that answer your question?
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, Lisa.
So my husband and I are constantly going back and forth, and he's always saying that I take too long to make the presentation because I want to make it thorough. And I am constantly saying, no, they need to hear all this. And so thanks, Rick. He just won.
Well, and you know, Lisa, I understand thorough, right? You've heard me tell the story of I thought the best way to do this because of my natural behavioral style, right? I thought the best way to do this was to bring a big, huge marketing book this thick and go page by page by page by page by page so that they would have absolutely every ounce of information that they could ever think they might need, and some they didn't, because that was me being thorough. It was me being comprehensive. It was me being, you know, detail oriented. And what I found over time was that people don't have the time for that, right? And frankly, that was 20 years ago. So people today have even less time. And so the streamlined version of these things, I will agree that not having seen yet exactly what you guys are doing, I would err on the side of David's thought of get to it faster for most people than not, just because of experience, because that seems to be what people are looking for. Or
I owe you a bottle of wine, Rick.
So the other thing, Lisa, that might help you, because you're not alone, right? There are a lot of us who want to make sure that we're being complete in this whole conversation. What might help is develop a question or two that gives that control over to the client, right? So I'm curious, you know, certainly we want to be as efficient and effective with you, Mr. and Mrs. Lee, this evening as we possibly can be. What would be the best use of our time together? We can start here and go here. We can jump right to here. Right? Did you have any questions on this? You can give them a small menu if it makes you feel like you've at least offered it and they said, no, we don't want it, we want to go here. Right? That might make you feel better about jumping over some of the stuff as a suggestion.
I'll take that. Thanks, Rick.
All righty. So let's keep cruising forward. My goodness, do I talk too much? Okay. If you haven't noticed yet, we are absolutely not going to be finished on time next Friday. So we're gonna deal with that on Friday. I'm going to talk with you about what the options are, and we'll see how we're going to rectify that, because we are so not going to be done. The next step is the difference between an agent and a consultant, or the functionary and the fiduciary. I'm going to ask you to read that on your own. Right? It's an important distinction. It's a long script. And so a lot of people do a kind of a bullet pointed version of this. I'm not sure that it's quite necessary, right? I've seen people write this kind of thing out with bullet points and hand it over as a document for them to quickly review. I've seen people include this in the pre-listing package so that it's gone ahead of time and they can ask questions about it if they so choose. The gist, however, is for you to understand that there is a difference between someone who behaves as an agent and someone who behaves as a full-blown consultant. Or in other words, a functionary, someone who just kind of puts people through the motions, versus a real fiduciary whose job it is to look out for their interests above anyone else's, including our own, right? And the language of this script is important for you to get down, I think, in terms of the functionary is just somebody who kind of does the work. The fiduciary, we're talking about words like consultant, trust, confidence, relationship, right? Education, listen, solutions, satisfy, exceed, all those things in that second paragraph. So I'm going to ask you to read through it on your own and come back with any questions you might have. But the main reason that I'm pointing you to it is for you to get the mindset of a consultant or a fiduciary different than the mindset of an agent or a functionary, right? It's all about educating on behalf of others and helping people obtain the results that they are looking for.
So Rick,
Yes, ma'am.
so that's really, I started to wrap my mind around this could you take that away from me? Last night, sorry, David's squeaking. And I thought
David has a chew toy.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting. But really, it's all about just the thought process. It's not like with the exclusive right to represent a buyer, it is actually a legal document saying you are the fiduciary. But in this case, it's the choice that you make as to how you behave toward your client as a seller. Is that correct?
Well, I think both are correct, right? Because the fiduciary relationship is solidified in our state via one of two documents, right? And they're agency-related documents. So on the buyer side, it's when you sign an exclusive right to represent a buyer, you now are in a fiduciary relationship with that buyer. And on the seller side, when you sign a listing agreement, that is the agency document that creates that fiduciary relationship. So my answer to your question is yes and yes. There is a process and a document that creates that fiduciary relationship. However, what I'm asking you to do is understand exactly what that means, is understand just because you sign a piece of paper, if you don't also understand the mindset differences between a functionary and a fiduciary, you don't quite have what you need to actually fulfill your role as such. Does that help?
Yes, that helps.
Okay, good. And did I see Debbie get on?
There's a blank box down here and it doesn't say someone is on it.
Okay, all right. Because what I wanted Debbie to say, Deb, if you're on mute. If you're not, that's okay. Okay, so I'm pretty certain that I wanted Debbie to give you her actual script, which I'll get from her and deliver back to you on Friday. But I'm pretty certain that Debbie takes time at a listing consult to actually have a short conversation around behaving like a fiduciary. She utilizes short pieces of that second paragraph to make sure that it's spoken, to say to people, our role for you is to act as your fiduciary, and here's what that means to me, right? She takes a moment to underline that and make sure that people understand the main differences without necessarily going through that whole big long script, right? But she'll give an example or two of what that looks like. She'll say it out loud to underline its importance, if that's helpful. Okay, let's keep going. The needs analysis. So the needs analysis, you have a needs analysis on both the buy side and the list side. On the list side, it's shorter. And yet it's done for a similar reason, right? Is to get clarity from the seller and to create clarity for the seller. Both are important, right? You need clarity to know what the seller expects of you and what's important. And the seller needs clarity from themselves about how they're going to make decisions, what's driving this move. So the needs analysis takes an understanding of their motivation and takes it one step further to ensure that you and the seller are on the same page about what it is they're looking for. The difference between a needs analysis and no needs analysis is that with no proper needs analysis done, you are guessing, you are assuming that you know what's important to a seller. And what do we typically assume is most important to a seller?
Price.
That is the assumption that most people make, right? They make the assumption that price is important, and therefore all the conversations end up being about price. Now, in an example of this, and just in order for us to save time, I'm going to ask you to review this needs analysis on your own. I'm going to give you an opportunity to run it with each other on Friday in the beginning, right, in breakout rooms. So I want you to kind of look at this needs analysis and be ready to run it. I'm going to on Friday run an example with you, but to move us into pricing before we finish tonight, or at least market conditions before we finish tonight, I want to kind of just shortcut this a little bit to say, in most conversations where this is used with a seller, price is rarely the first thing that comes up when you ask them what on a scale of 1 to 10, what makes this a real 10, right? What one thing is most important to you to make this experience a 10? Price rarely comes out first. It's almost always something else. It's timing, it's showings, it's other things. It's communication, it's honesty. I've had people say things like, the most important thing for me is that you are honest all the time, every time, even when it's hard. And then we ask them for a second thing, and then a third thing, and then at the end we ask them to prioritize them, right? So sometimes, even if price comes out third, sometimes some people may move it to the top, right? Because they simply can't buy in Georgia if they don't get a certain number here, right? But we're kind of asking them to outline exactly what we need to be for them to say yes. It's kind of like cheating, right? Because really what you're doing is you're walking through a conversation that says, tell me exactly who I need to be for you to hire me so that I can go and be that for the rest of this conversation. That's the idea of the needs analysis, as well as to give clarity to the sellers themselves around what's important to them. Because I will tell you, for most of your sellers, until you ask these questions, what's most important, what's second most important, what's third most important, right? And taken all three of those things taken together, if all three of those things show up, is this like a massive win for you? And oh, by the way, who else has consulted you in this manner in the last 30 days, right? You're starting to draw distinctions between you and others. But if they can have all three of those things, they've created a win. And they've created it with you. And they've created it verbally and in their mind's eye prior to them even hiring somebody. Do you see how they're inching closer and closer and closer to already being in partnership with you by the way we're walking them through this process? Are you starting to see that by leaping ahead and asking objection handler type questions before you get everybody through this process is way premature? Because this process solves so many of the issues that might come up or that you might be afraid will come up later on. And again, I've done it both ways. I've leapt into the deep water without quite learning how to swim all the way, and I've struggled. When you go through the process of learning and bringing everyone through the process, you get to the deep water and you're like, this is a cinch. So your homework is review that needs analysis, maybe even practice it with somebody, because on Friday you're going to come back. I'm going to demonstrate it once with somebody, and I'm going to send you into breakout rooms to do that one-on-one at least once each with somebody so you've practiced it a little bit. Okay?
Can I just clarify the analysis you're talking about? Is that the last like few pages of the scripts that we got sent on Monday?
So yeah, we are in those scripts tonight.
I just wanted to make sure that that's because I think it has a different name.
Yes, it's page 4, and it's called the needs analysis.
Oh, just kidding. Okay, so no, I was looking at the wrong thing, I think. Oh, yeah. You're right. I apologize. I was looking at the strategic positioning analysis. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, we are getting there slowly, but we're getting there. All right, so if you'll notice, the very bottom of the needs analysis ends with a transition statement. And that transition statement is, if it's okay with you, I'd like to begin to discuss the current state of the real estate market. Right, so we're transitioning from the needs analysis that you just completed into a conversation about market conditions. And we do that with 3 very simple tools. The first tool is this list of questions, which is the next page. There are 7 market conditions questions, which we simply ask the seller. Now, if you remember, I talked to you about getting these scripts into your head. And one of the ways, this is a perfect example of how you can handle scripts. Well, that looks terrible, doesn't it? Because if you take a look, if you don't have it in front of you, what we've done is we've just taken each of the questions and put some blank lines after it and turned it into a form, right? Originally, when we gave this out, this was just a big paragraph of questions. And somebody had the idea, and it wasn't me, somebody had the idea, well, couldn't we turn that into a form that I could just have on my clipboard so I wouldn't have to memorize this whole big long paragraph of questions? And I thought, that's a brilliant idea. You could do that, as I mentioned, with the whole script, really. You can break it out so that you can have it on your clipboard and use it as a bit of a cheat sheet, right? In this case, now you just are filling in the answers as they give them on a clipboard. Nobody has to know you're reading the questions because you are 100% sure of them, right? It's called legal cheating. So let's do this. Somebody unmute and be the agent. Read through these questions. I will give you some answers, and then we'll talk about them.
So, Mr. Seller, before we get into the facts that I've prepared for you to review, I'm curious to know what it is you've heard or seen recently about the housing and the financial market.
Well, that's a really good question. So I know the stock market's kind of been up and down, up and down, up and down, depending on, what's going on with, vaccine, no vaccine, whatnot. So the market's been kind of up and down, and the housing market I've kind of heard is roaring. I don't really know what roaring means, but I've heard it's kind of roaring.
Yes, that's actually very true. We actually have more buyers right now looking for homes than we have inventory. So this is actually a great time to be looking at selling your market. Just realized I skipped something. So where did you hear that news? Sorry.
That's a great question. So where did I hear that news? I think on the news. I think just on the news.
And was that more national or was it local?
Well, it was Anderson Cooper. So I'm assuming that was maybe more national in scope. I don't know that it was necessarily Connecticut news.
Okay.
Unless Anderson Cooper was focusing on Fairfield County.
Okay, got it. And so how do you think that this current state might affect you and your property?
Well, I'm hoping that if the market is hot, that I'm going to experience some benefit in that. If things are roaring elsewhere, I'm hoping they're roaring here, and I'm hoping I'm the beneficiary of that.
Okay, so sidebar question: should I be responding or just kind of stick in interview mode? Because I feel like
Great question. Great question. And so I appreciate the fact that what you just said. I feel like I want to jump in.
Yeah.
Most of us do. And the path that I'm going to encourage you down with these questions is interview mode. It's ask, listen and write it down, and move on to the next, right? If there's something that has to be clarified, you could ask a clarifying question. You could say something like, could you tell me a little bit more about that? What exactly do you mean by that? Right? You can ask some clarifying questions. However, this is not the place for an editorial on your part, right? Because the focus is 100% on the client. The whole idea that this is like a brain dump that the client gets to do. And it's a mistake that we make because we know we have information to share, and we think we want to share it to build some better rapport. You'll have an opportunity to do that, right? This is not that spot. So thank you for that, because it's the exact right question to ask, because most people feel like they want to have more of a conversation. And this is really just let the seller brain dump. And here's why, Margaret. The more you allow the seller to talk, the better answers you will receive. And that helps the seller more than anybody, right? Because the seller hasn't thought about these things, and you want the seller to verbalize these things, because when they verbalize them, all of a sudden they become far realer than just kind of floating around in the back of someone's head. And then if you need to later on, you can come back and say, hey, do you remember when I asked you that question earlier? Do you remember your answer? Because sometimes the answers they give here can help you objection handle later on, depending on what they've answered. So the quieter you are and the more you let them just kind of brain dump, the better off everyone is long term.
Okay. And then at the end of this, would I say something like, okay, that's great, we are going to speak about some market conditions in a little bit, or just, I feel like I don't want to leave them hanging out there, because I'm wondering, are they going to be like, is that the case? Or, you tell me, or, like, how would you navigate that?
Yeah. So what I would say to you is, let's keep going, and that'll answer itself.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Okay, Rick, any other thoughts?
So just like if a seller interrupts during the process, you're going to encourage them, right? There was, now I forget the president that did it so well. Oh, it was Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was so good when he was in front of the press. If there was a question he didn't want to answer, he would do things like, you know what, Margaret, that's a great question. I'm just going to jot that down right here, and we will absolutely get back to that. Who else? Lisa? Yeah. Donna? Yeah, go ahead. Right. And he never got back to it, because then the press conference was over and he'd leave. Right. And so that's a mode of deflection that we're not answering the question in this case because we don't want to answer the question. We're deflecting it. We're kind of kicking the can down the road, knowing that the process will likely either answer that question in due course or render that question irrelevant or unnecessary by the time we get to the end of the process, right? So that's kind of why we keep directing the conversation back to the way this is written. It's written very specifically with a certain flow to get people from spot to spot, if that helps.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. So what are our last two questions?
Okay, Rick, any other thoughts on current market conditions before we press forward?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And lastly, do you have any specific questions about the market so that I can be sure that we cover them?
The only thing I would say is I do know that my neighbor around the corner just sold without real estate representation. And I think the house is a decent comp for mine. So I want to be certain that as we're looking at numbers and whatnot, that we keep that particular property in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll definitely be looking at comps for all the recent sales in your area. I think that's it, right?
Yes, perfect. So what do you notice? Talk to me about some ahas with these questions.
It does feel like you're sort of, I don't want to say leading them there, but to your point, making them think a little bit as opposed to like, and it's not like, maybe it's a little bit more of a confidence thing because you're talking about what they've heard in the news, what they've seen, as opposed to what I'm telling them, which will now validate stuff they've already heard. You're almost pulling it out maybe.
Yeah. Do you remember back, I don't know, I don't even know if it's still around anymore. Remember Sims, the clothing store? An educated consumer is our best customer, right? Do you remember that commercial? I may be dating myself. However, right? Sims used to have commercials that said an educated consumer is our best customer. This is a version of that, right? Because an educated consumer is our best customer too. And sometimes the best educated consumers are ones that are allowed to participate, right? They're participating, they're thinking, right? A thinking potential seller is our best customer. Because if all someone's doing is kicking back, waiting for us to deliver information, they're not a part of the process. And I will tell you that you have a 50%, your chances are 50% fewer of getting hired that evening if you do all the talking and don't involve or engage the client. The client needs to think. The client, and you're going to see when we get to the pricing conversation, we're going to ask them to do a whole lot of thinking. This is not presentation mode that we're in. This is consultation mode, and we're gonna take all the data out, and we're gonna walk them through it, and we're gonna ask them to draw conclusions from it, right? So they need to be engaged. They need to be paying attention to what all this looks like. This is not me walking in saying, "Here's your house is worth $595, and here's why." That is not this process, right? As a matter of fact, this process does the exact opposite. We guide them to make the best decision for them, and then either objection handle that decision or agree with it. One of those two things. So for those of you who thought that the listing consultation was all like culminated, like the high point of the whole listing consultation was when you finally get like the big reveal, right, of the big number, we are going to massively disappoint you, right? Because the big reveal is actually revealed from the moment you start asking these questions all the way through the next two graphs into the SPA, into sharing some comps and the competition, so that they then get to make the big reveal about what the right answer is. Remember, the person who feels the most right and who does the most talking feels like this whole thing went the best. And if that's you, that means the client didn't think it went so well. So you have to continually cede control of the perceived control of the conversation so that you help them get smarter. And by helping them get smarter, you help them make really smart decisions, which makes them feel good, and it makes them feel good about you because you're the one who guided them to feeling that way. Do you see the psychology behind this? Because that is the psychology. I just in a couple of sentences gave you a summary of the entire psychology behind this whole process. It's you being a consultant to help people self-discover the best path forward for themselves. And you then get the credit for that because you were the one sitting across the table helping them get there. They don't know why they like you. They don't know why they feel so good about the process. All they know is that they feel good about the process and that they like you. So when you close and say, you know, is there anything else I can answer before we sign the contract? There's no reason for them to say no, right? Oh crap, 5:53. How did that happen? All right. So we're going to transition through in 7 quick minutes. We're probably only going to get through the next graph, and then on Friday we will finish the second graph and dive right into the SPA. By the way, the SPA, most of you have heard of a CMA, right? A comparative market analysis. We don't do those here. What we do here is an SPA, and that's a strategic positioning analysis. You have the script, you can read through it before we meet again on Friday to see kind of where we're headed. If you want to read the end of the book before the middle. And then be prepared. We're going to outline that and spend a good chunk of our time on Friday talking through pricing. But I want to share with you on my screen. Are you seeing that graph? All the pretty colors? Okay. So this comes from Brokermetrics, and you have in front of you in the materials that I sent out on Monday, you have the next page, which outlines some two scripts. We have an absorption rate script or a month supply of inventory script plus a Brokermetrics pricing script. And so what I want to do is I want to read you through this pricing script. I'll read the script. You look at the graph as I'm reading the script so you can see how the two go hand in hand. Now, one of the things that that Margaret said was she got to the bottom of that and she kind of wanted a transition statement. And you're right, Margaret, there isn't a transition statement written on the bottom of this script. However, the transition statement is as simple as once you get through anything else and they say no, great. If it's okay with you, let's take a look at two opportunities to view kind of the macro economic picture that we have going on locally before we dive into the micro as it relates to your house, right? I like kind of using the macro and micro definitions of being the local economist because nobody else does, right? Nobody says macroeconomics or microeconomics in a listing consultation, which is why I would love for you to, because I think it makes you sound really smart. And what comes after you saying that is some cool stuff, which is first in the supply and demand graph in Brokermetrics. So take a look at the chart on your screen. I'm going to read through this script for you. It goes very quickly. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, on this snapshot of the current market, the red lines represent homes that are on the market and available. The blue lines represent homes that are currently under agreement, and the green lines represent homes that have actually sold and closed. I'm sure you could see how simple it would be to place you on the red line, but a much more difficult task to place you on the blue or green lines as they represent a much smaller target. Do you agree? And someone would say yes. Great, you do want to be on the blue or green lines, don't you? That's the script. It's pretty simple, right? The only thing this is designed to do is to help people understand that in any given town, in any given moment, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the market and not all of it sells. Now, this is not, you can see that this is from 2017 because I wanted to be live on Brokermetrics with you this evening, and I struggled getting in. We have an issue that has to be fixed by Terradatum tomorrow, so I couldn't get in, so I had to find something old and scan it. Even the last couple of months, those green and blue lines are far higher, right? But there's still room on top of the red lines, right? We want to help people see visually that they have a choice. They can either be part of the red lines, because we can just pick any number. Any number gets you on the red line, right? We could stop right now and choose any number. You could be on the red line. However, if you want the green or the blue lines, which is actually sold, under agreement, contracted, and then sold, you've got to get really on purpose because it's a much smaller target we have to hit. Do you see the gist of this whole thing? Right? It's not a hard script. And that's really all you use this for. This is a 3-minute conversation. You haul this sucker out. What I used to do is every single month, because this updates after the first of the month, is print a new one out for the towns that I was working in. I would laminate the new one, and I would just bring the same laminated tool to every consult that I did. I liked laminating it because if there was any questions on it, I could take out a dry erase and I could draw on it. I could give it to them. They could draw on it. Questions, comments, concerns about this graph? So one of the questions I oftentimes get is, where do you get that? Right, so I'll answer that question for you. Brokermetrics is the software program that exists in the market centers. It is a broker-based program, which means you're not supposed to have access to it. We downloaded it on the computers in the market center to be able to share that information with you. However, it's not something I can broadcast to your laptops. So you do need to be in the market centers to use. It's on certain computers in each market center to utilize it. I do teach a class monthly that will be probably next. I think it's going on the schedule for late next week or early the following week, called Know Your Numbers with Brokermetrics and the MLS, where I will teach you how to use Brokermetrics. So if you don't know how to use Brokermetrics, you can certainly ask someone, ask a staff member in the office for a supply and demand graph for a certain town, and they can get that to you and email it to you if you're not coming into the office, or if you don't know how to do it. Or if you don't need one between now and the end of next week, make sure you come to that class called Know Your Numbers with Brokermetrics and the MLS, and I will teach you how to use it. By that time, it will be fixed and I can actually bring it up on my screen and teach a class around it. So the macro conversation that you're going to have starts with those 7 questions. It moves through this Brokermetrics pricing conversation and then ends, the macro piece of it ends with absorption rate and month supply of inventory. Absorption rate and month supply of inventory. And basically what that is, if you look at the example I gave you, it's a breakdown in a certain town by a price point of how many months supply exists per price point. I'm going to give you the script that goes along with this, plus the tools on how you run this data. Because to me, this is where it's at nowadays, right? This is one of the main conversation points from a macro perspective to help them understand what's going on in the marketplace. I will give you that data on Friday, and then we will move right into the SPA, which is the pricing and positioning conversation that I know I promised for today and clearly lied about. So we're going to take care of that on Friday, and then we will move from that through the listing contract and into the anatomy of a seller transaction. Make sense? All right, guys. I appreciate you hanging in there. I appreciate all that you bring to the table. Thank you for your patience. We are slogging through this. I just, you guys present a really interesting opportunity for me, because the comments and questions that you bring to the table are so valuable and so relevant that I don't want to stop having those conversations at the risk of not getting to all of the content scheduled for that night. I hope that by diving in, going down some of these bunny trails, you're getting the information that's important to you and your questions answered, and we'll deal with the content issue and our lack of time in a different way. So I hope that that's been beneficial to you. I don't mean to sacrifice content at the expense of question answering, and yet your questions is what's in your head. So I want to make sure that we're getting through all of that. All right, have a great evening. Have fun. We'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and we will follow up on Friday with our next Ignite class. Good night.
Thanks,
Thank you.